At the Whitmore estate, where a lavish wedding is taking place, an unexpected guest, a woman of color, suddenly appears, shattering the perfect atmosphere with a shocking accusation.
Rebecca's not who you think she is, Gregory. She destroyed my family and many others.
Her words unravel a series of dark secrets, where ambition clashes with justice, and everyone must pay the price for what they have sown. In the battle between truth and power, can justice find the strength to rise from the ruins? If you want to uncover all the dark secrets and unexpected in this story, hit subscribe so you don't miss a single part. The Whitmore estate, perched atop a hill in Virginia, stands as a symbol of power and prosperity passed down through generations. Once the center of a sprawling plantation, it has now transformed into a luxurious property, with a white stone-paved driveway leading to a neoclassical mansion distinguished by marble columns and intricate domes. Behind the mansion, a vast garden glows under the light of thousands of lanterns strung from tree branches. A central fountain featuring a Greek god statue adds an ethereal charm to what is being hailed as the wedding of the century. Guests, prominent figures from the worlds of politics, business, and the arts gather to clink glasses of champagne and exchange praises for the groom, Gregory Whitmore, and his bride, Rebecca Delancey. In a quiet corner of the garden, a journalist from Wealth Chronicle, a magazine dedicated to covering the lives of the ultra-rich, observes the scene, capturing moments from this opulent affair. To him, the name Whitmore is pure gold for any headline, especially when tied to Gregory. Gregory Whitmore, 28, is the sole heir to the Whitmore fortune, a dynasty built on financial and real estate empires. He exudes charm, tall, with neatly combed dark brown hair and a perfectly tailored black suit that accentuates his refined demeanor. Though Gregory seemingly has it all: money, fame, power, he feels a quiet unease in his role. Beneath his polished exterior lies an internal conflict between fulfilling the expectations of his lineage and pursuing a life of his own choosing. Today, as he stands on the ceremonial stage, a flicker of apprehension crosses his eyes. No one notices, but deep inside, Gregory senses something is amiss. Perhaps it's the way Rebecca smiles, cold, flawless, like a marble statue. Rebecca Delancey, 26, is a striking woman with deep blue eyes and cascading blonde hair. She hails from an old Southern aristocratic family, though the Delancey fortune had dwindled by the previous generation. Armed with sharp intelligence and boundless ambition, Rebecca rebuilt her status. Graduating with honors from an Ivy League university, she quickly climbed the social ladder, becoming a celebrated investor in the biotech sector. Yet beneath her polished exterior lies a calculating individual, willing to do whatever it takes to achieve her goals. To Rebecca, Gregory is not just a life partner, but a key piece in her grander scheme to solidify her power and influence. As she stands on the stage, her smile is more than an expression of joy. It is a declaration that everything she has ever desired is now within her grasp. The music stopped. A heavy silence enveloped the room, as if the entire world held its breath. The grand doors of the main hall burst open with a thunderous crash. All heads turned, their eyes locking onto the figure standing in the doorway. Amara Daniels entered, like a cold gust of wind cutting through the opulence and splendor. At 26, Amara was a woman of color carrying a story few wanted to hear: a story of injustice, pain, and loss. She had grown up in the impoverished outskirts of the same town where the Whitmore estate now sat in all its grandeur. Her mother, a loyal and hard-working housekeeper, had been falsely accused and stripped of everything. Amara had spent nearly a decade fighting to unearth the truth that powerful families like the Whitmores and the Delanceys had worked so hard to bury. She was not one to give up. Though she lacked their resources, she possessed an unyielding determination forged by her deepest wounds. Today, as she stepped into the wedding, Amara carried not just evidence, she carried the resolve to make the world face the truth, no matter the cost. She wore a simple green dress, slightly wrinkled and damp at the hem from an unexpected rain. Her curly hair was neatly tied back, revealing a delicate but resolute face. In her hand were two modest items, an old silver necklace and a crumpled stack of documents, small things, but weighty with truth and memory. Amara didn't rush. Her steps were slow yet purposeful, each one a declaration that she belonged here not as an invited guest, but as a witness to the lies this estate was built upon. Her wet footprints left faint marks on the polished wooden floor, as though she were etching the truth into the perfect facade of Whitmore grandeur. The atmosphere in the hall shifted abruptly. Whispers rippled through the groups of guests. The powerful, accustomed to controlling every situation, now wore expressions of unease at the arrival of someone outside their world. Some quickly reached for their phones, discreetly snapping pictures of the rare spectacle. The gazes of curiosity, discomfort, and mockery tangled together, as if they all silently asked the same question.
Who is she? What is she doing here?
Gregory Whitmore, standing on the ceremonial platform, stared at the stranger. His face betrayed a flicker of surprise, not at the interruption, but at the intensity in her eyes. A seed of unease sprouted within him, though he couldn't quite name it. Beside him, Rebecca Delancey tightened her grip on her bouquet. Her sharp blue eyes gleamed with suspicion. Her perfect smile remained frozen in place, but her fingers trembled slightly, as if struggling to maintain control. Amara stopped in the middle of the hall, facing Gregory. Without hesitation, she raised the old silver necklace, its tarnished surface catching the light from the chandeliers. Her voice rang out, clear and unshakable. Gregory, don't marry her. Rebecca isn't who you think she is. She destroyed my family and so many others. Her words sliced through the flawless atmosphere of the wedding like a knife. A wave of murmurs spread through the room, a chilling breeze cutting through the warmth of golden lights and classical music. The guests, many of them seasoned in wielding power and control, could not hide their astonishment. A middle-aged woman in a deep red silk gown leaned toward the man beside her and whispered,
Who is this? An old lover of Gregory's, perhaps?
In another corner, a group of young socialites, the privileged children of wealthy families, secretly filmed the scene on their phones. One of them smirked and muttered,
This wedding just got way more interesting than I expected.
Rebecca, standing beside Gregory, kept her cold, composed smile. But a closer look revealed her hands gripping the bridal bouquet so tightly that the delicate petals quivered.
Gregory, don't waste your time with this nonsense. We both know she's just an opportunist seeking attention.
Rebecca stepped forward, positioning herself between Amara and Gregory. Her voice turned sharp, cutting through the murmurs around the room.
Amara, I'm not sure how you managed to sneak in here, but it doesn't matter. If you don't leave on your own right now, I'll have security do it for you.
Amara held her ground. Her eyes burned with determination, a flicker of defiance unmistakable in her gaze. She didn't address Rebecca. Instead, she looked straight at Gregory, as if willing her words to pierce through every layer of doubt within him.
I'm not here to beg for pity. I'm here to speak the truth.
She raised the old silver necklace higher, letting the chandelier light catch its tarnished surface, making it shimmer faintly in the room's golden glow.
This necklace belonged to my mother. She worked for Rebecca's family, and she lost everything, her honor, her job, and even her life. Because of her, Gregory, she's not just a liar. Rebecca was involved in your father's death.
Gregory staggered back a step, his eyes clouding with uncertainty. Amara's words struck him like a blow, forcing open questions he had long buried. He turned to Rebecca, his voice low but thick with doubt.
Rebecca, is there something I don't know?
Rebecca let out a soft laugh, but the smile now on her face was strained, brittle. She tilted her head, looking at Amara with the disdain of someone swatting away an irritating fly.
Gregory, she's spouting nonsense. Do you really think I'd have anything to do with such absurd accusations? Let's not waste another moment on her.
Rebecca glanced toward the nearby security guards, her blue eyes flashing with icy authority.
Escort her out, now.
Before the guards could move, Amara held up the stack of papers in her hand, her voice cutting through the rising tension with even greater force.
Don't touch me. These are the proof, forged contracts, threats.
Her gaze locked onto Gregory's, unwavering and earnest, her voice now carrying a mix of plea and challenge.
Do you have the courage to face the truth, Gregory? Or will you follow in your father's footsteps, turning your back on justice?
The atmosphere in the hall felt frozen in time. The guests, accustomed to the unshakable dominance of the Whitmore family, now stood in stunned silence, waiting to see how this unexpected scene would unfold. Gregory took a deep breath. His gaze shifted from Amara to Rebecca. The hesitation in his eyes hardened into resolve.
Rebecca, if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about. I need time to uncover the truth.
He turned to the security guards.
Don't touch her. She'll leave when she's ready.
Rebecca froze, her hands loosening their grip on the bouquet until the flowers dangled limply. She opened her mouth to respond, but her lips quivered, unable to form the words. Amara met Gregory's eyes once more. This time, her gaze softened but remained firm and unyielding.
I hope you have the courage to face the truth, Gregory. It's the only thing that can save you now.
She turned and walked away, her shoes leaving faint, wet traces on the polished wooden floor. Gregory stood motionless, his eyes following her retreating figure. Behind him, Rebecca's expression shifted, her eyes wide with panic. For the first time, her perfect composure seemed to crack. The room hummed with low murmurs, whispers filling the air.
Who is she? Could this story be true?
Gregory turned back to Rebecca, his gaze now colder, more distant.
The wedding is on hold.
Rebecca took a step back, her eyes betraying fear, though her voice fought to maintain calmness.
Gregory, don't let a stranger ruin everything we've built. I love you, and we know what matters.
Gregory didn't respond. He turned away, stepping off the ceremonial platform and walking toward the grand doors, where Amara's figure had disappeared moments earlier. Her words replayed in his mind, fragments of truth spinning into an incomplete, yet inescapable picture. Outside, the rain began to pour. Gregory stood beneath the shelter of the mansion's awning, his eyes scanning the darkness for Amara's silhouette. She was gone, a phantom vanishing into the storm, but her words lingered. A quiet voice echoed in his thoughts.
If you don't face the truth, Gregory, you'll lose yourself.
Gregory exhaled deeply, stepping off the porch. The rain soaked his shoes almost instantly, but he paid no mind. Turning to a nearby guard, he spoke with quiet urgency.
Take me to her. I need to know the truth.
The bright lights of the Whitmore mansion glowed behind him, a beacon of the life he had always known. Yet Gregory, shoes damp and clothes heavy with rain, stepped into the dark night like a man leaving his sanctuary behind. Inside the hall, Rebecca stood motionless, her arms hanging loosely at her sides. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a renewed determination.
If you think you can uncover the truth without destroying everything, Gregory, you'll soon learn how wrong you are.
As Gregory embarked on his journey to confront the truth, Rebecca silently resolved to protect her secrets at any cost. Amara led Gregory away from the glittering lights of the Whitmore mansion. The farther they went, the darker the path became, shrouded not just in the shadows of night but in the neglect of an entire society. The asphalt road connecting the town center to the outskirts seemed abandoned, halfway cracked and pitted with potholes. The dim, sporadic streetlights revealed a scene of decay, rickety wooden houses with roofs riddled with holes, windows boarded up with planks or covered by torn plastic sheets. The air carried a damp, musty smell of garbage left to rot in the streets, mixed with smoke from small fires where a few homeless people huddled for warmth. The distant barking of dogs echoed through the night, blending with the metallic clatter of something being dragged across the ground. Amara stopped at a narrow alley, her eyes scanning the weathered brick walls, smeared with layers of graffiti. One mural depicted a once thriving neighborhood, now overlaid with jagged red spray paint that read,
"Dream stolen."
She led Gregory through the alley into an open lot. This had once been a lively community, a neighborhood where hard-working Black families had poured their hearts into building better lives for their children. The scene of devastation, all that remained were fragments of foundations from homes long demolished, tangled among overgrown weeds and shards of concrete. In one corner, a broken bicycle lay discarded, its rusted wheels twisted and lifeless. A large wooden sign, battered and leaning precariously in the tall grass, caught Gregory's eye. Though faded and weathered, the white painted letters were still legible.
"Whitmore Redevelopment Project, promising a new future."
Amara walked toward the sign and crouched down, her fingers brushing over a small, broken piece of brick.
"This is all that's left of our home,"
she said quietly. She stood and turned to Gregory, her gaze piercing, sharp as a blade.
"They told us they needed the land to build a modern redevelopment, to give us better lives. Do you know what happened instead? They forced us out, leaving this place a wasteland."
Amara gestured toward the scattered debris around them.
"Rebecca and your father didn't just take our land. They stole our dreams, our dignity, and the futures of countless families. My friends, the kids I used to play with on this very street, they're living in cars now or crammed into temporary shelters. Do you see it, Gregory? This is the legacy your family left behind."
Her voice cut through the silence, raw with grief and anger, each word a demand that Gregory confront the truth standing before him. Gregory stood silently, taking in the desolation before him when a deep, cutting voice rang out from behind.
"Do you know what your father and Rebecca did?"
Nathan stepped out of the shadows, his tall, wiry frame carrying the weight of a lifetime of struggle. His face was etched with deep lines, his eyes heavy with exhaustion and the simmering anger of years of injustice. He wore an old, tattered coat, the sleeves frayed, and mud-streaked jeans faded from countless days of wear. His shoes, with soles nearly worn through, seemed to bear the imprint of more than just roads they had walked through years of hardship. His angular face was taut, his jaw clenched, and his bloodshot eyes burned with a fury that had long been suppressed. Nathan moved slowly toward Gregory, each step deliberate, as if every stride carried the pain and resentment of an entire community. His fists were clenched tightly, but his voice remained unnervingly calm, each word chosen with precision, as though he were holding himself back from letting the anger fully consume him.
"I used to live here, Gregory. I was part of this place. And then your father and Rebecca came, promising us a bright future. But it was all lies."
Nathan's voice was low, steady, but his piercing gaze bore into Gregory, demanding he confront a reality that could no longer be ignored.
"Do you see it, Gregory? The destroyed foundations, the children who once laughed and played here. Where are they now? We didn't just lose our homes. We lost our dreams, our belief that we deserved something better."
Nathan turned and pointed toward a broken bench. A small, weathered child's shoe lay forgotten beside it.
"That's my son's shoe. He used to sit there waiting for me to come home so we could eat dinner together. Rebecca and your father didn't just take my house. They took my family. My boy is growing up in a shelter now, in a place where the doors can't keep out the wind, let alone the world outside."
Nathan's voice, once controlled, began to crack under the weight of his emotion. He stepped closer to Gregory, close enough that Gregory could feel the raw energy radiating from him with every breath.
"I gave everything, Gregory. I worked 16 hours a day with these hands."
Nathan raised his calloused, scarred hands, holding them up as if they were the evidence of a lifetime's worth of labor.
"I never complained about hard work, but they, your father and Rebecca, took everything I built. They pushed us into the abyss and laughed as we..."
He glared at Gregory, his eyes sharp and unyielding, his words cutting like a knife.
"You think you're special? You think you deserve everything your family has? You're wrong, Gregory. You're standing there in your expensive suit because your father built it with our blood, sweat, and despair."
Nathan lowered his voice, but it carried a weight that could not be ignored.
This isn't just about your father. It's about you. What are you going to do now, Gregory? Now that you know the legacy you've inherited was built on our suffering.
Nathan turned away and walked toward the faded sign bearing the words Whitmore Redevelopment Project. His shoulders trembled with anger as he pointed at the sign, his voice trembling but firm.
Redevelopment. They called it redevelopment, but all they did was sweep us away like trash. They made us invisible, but I won't be invisible anymore.
Rebecca stood between Gregory and Amara, her shoulders straight, radiating confidence, as if she alone held the reins of the situation. Her golden hair gleamed under the sparse streetlights, creating a stark contrast against the engulfing darkness. Her voice was soft, almost soothing, but each word was honed like a blade.
Gregory, I understand why you're confused. A stranger shows up, accusing your family, your father, and even me. Of course, anyone would stop to think.
Rebecca stepped forward, her hand gently resting on Gregory's shoulder in a possessive gesture. Yet her sharp eyes remained fixed on Amara and Nathan, watchful and calculating.
But remember this, Gregor spent his life building your family's legacy. He wasn't perfect, but everything he did for you, for us.
Her voice grew slower, sweeter, yet laced with veiled accusation.
The people standing before you now, they don't know what it means to work for what they want. All they know is how to blame others. And now they're trying to drag you down with them.
Rebecca's body language was subtle but deliberate. She tilted her head slightly, as if to appear more gentle, but her eyes stayed cold, unyielding, a predator protecting its claim. Amara met Rebecca's gaze, her eyes burning like embers in the night. If Rebecca was a concealed blade wrapped in silk, Amara was a spear, unwavering and direct, aiming for the heart of the matter. Her voice was resolute, giving Gregory no room to evade.
Rebecca's right, Gregory. Your father spent his life building this legacy by destroying my family's and countless others. Do you think that's something to be proud of?
Amara stepped forward, now standing directly before Gregory. She didn't acknowledge Rebecca, as if her presence didn't matter. Her eyes locked onto his, demanding he confront the truth head-on.
You live in the glow of the Whitmore estate, but you've never thought about the shadows it casts. Do you even know what this place used to be, Gregory? It used to be home. My home. Nathan's home. The home of an entire community. And now, the children who grew up here don't even know what a real roof over their heads feels like.
Amara's body language was firm, uncompromising. Her fists clenched, her shoulders taut, as though summoning every ounce of strength to keep her voice steady. Her eyes, however, betrayed no hatred, only profound pain and an unshakable determination. Nathan stepped forward to stand beside Amara. His shoulders quivered slightly, but it wasn't fear, it was the weight of anger that had simmered for too long. He glared at Gregory, then at Rebecca, his expression full of disdain. His voice was low, heavy with emotion.
You're right, Rebecca, we don't have power. But you know why? Because you took it from us.
Nathan pointed directly at Gregory, his voice rising, fueled by a raw intensity.
Did you ever think about us, Gregory? When your father and Rebecca stole our land, did you ever wonder how they did it? We didn't get a choice. We didn't get a say. And now, here you are, wrapped in everything we once had, and you dare look me in the eye and say you didn't know.
Nathan let out a bitter laugh, a sound equal parts sorrow and scorn.
No, we're not perfect. We don't have the power to fight the system your family built. But now we won't stay silent.
Nathan's body language erupted with his words. He punched his palm, his voice a growl of pent-up fury. Yet, when he turned back to Gregory, his gaze softened slightly, filled with grim resolve.
I'm not saying this because I hate you, Gregory. I'm saying this because I need to know what kind of man you are. Will you keep hiding from the truth, or will you stand up like we're doing now?
Gregory stood frozen between them, his eyes flickering from Amara to Nathan, then finally resting on Rebecca. He said nothing, but his face was a battlefield of inner turmoil, doubt carving deep lines into his features. His voice, low and barely audible, broke the silence.
I didn't know about this. I didn't think my father was capable of doing something like this.
He turned to Rebecca, his eyes heavy with suspicion.
Rebecca, do you have anything to say?
Rebecca's smile stayed in place, but the confidence in her voice faltered ever so slightly.
Gregory, you're not seriously considering their words over mine, are you? I've been here for you, through your hardest moments. I'm the one who understands you. Do you really think I could do the things they're accusing me of?
But her hands, clutching Gregory's arm tightly, told another story. She was trying to maintain control, her fingers digging into him as if to tether him to her. Her eyes darted quickly toward Amara and Nathan, and for a split second, a flicker of fear passed through them before she masked it with a defiant glare. Amara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled a worn envelope from her coat pocket. Its edges were frayed, its yellowed surface marked by years of wear and a history that refused to fade. She held it out in front of Gregory, her sharp gaze piercing through him like a blade.
Rebecca didn't just take our land. She destroyed my mother's life. And this.
Amara opened the envelope, pulling out an aged sheet of paper. The handwriting, though faded in places, was still legible blue ink scrawled across the page with a desperate urgency. Holding the letter up to the faint glow of the streetlight, she let its presence hang in the air like undeniable evidence. Her voice steadied, firm but laden with the weight of grief.
My mother wrote this before she was forced to leave this town, before she passed away.
Amara cast a burning glance at Rebecca, then turned back to Gregory.
In this letter, she documented everything. How Rebecca framed her, how your family threatened her, and how she was forced to give up everything she worked so hard to build. My mother was just a housekeeper, Gregory, but she didn't deserve this.
Gregory stared at the letter, his usually steady hands trembling as he took it from Amara. The ground beneath him seemed to shift, cracks forming in the foundation of everything he thought he knew. His eyes scanned the handwritten lines, each word drenched in pain and desperation. The image of his father, the man he had admired, now loomed in his mind, darkened by the accusations laid bare in the letter.
Your mother. She says my father was part of this, that he knew what Rebecca did.
Rebecca took a step back, a flash of panic crossing her face before she quickly masked it with her practiced smile.
Gregory, you're seriously considering believing this?
She said, her voice laced with disbelief.
This is the word of a woman who's no longer here to defend herself. Who's to say this letter is even real?
She stepped closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Her tone softened, becoming soothing yet subtly manipulative.
Don't you see? She's trying to pull you into an emotional trap. This isn't the truth, Gregory. It's just one side of the story, the side she wants you to believe.
Amara's laugh was dry, bitter, cutting through Rebecca's carefully crafted facade. Her gaze didn't waver.
There's no need to convince him, Rebecca. This letter says everything that needs to be said, and if Gregory has even a shred of integrity, he'll read it.
Amara turned to Gregory, her voice dropping, almost daring him.
The question isn't whether you believe it. The question is whether you have the courage to find out the truth.
Gregory turned to face Rebecca, his eyes meeting hers for the first time without their usual trust.
Rebecca, is this true? Did you frame her mother and force her out of her home to take their land?
Rebecca froze for a moment, her body stiffening, but she quickly let out a short, calculated laugh.
Gregory, I love you, but you don't seriously believe this ridiculous story, do you? A poor housekeeper, a dusty old letter, and now they want you to think I destroyed her life for land. I didn't even need to do that. Your father handled it all himself.
Nathan stepped forward, his voice low, but each word carried a thunderous weight.
She's right. Rebecca didn't have to do anything. She just stood back and watched as everything fell apart because of what your father and she orchestrated.
Nathan pointed at Gregory, his voice rising, thick with suppressed rage.
Have you ever thought about us, Gregory? When your father and Rebecca took our land, did you ever wonder how it happened? We didn't get a choice. We didn't get a say. And now you stand here, surrounded by everything we lost, and you claim you didn't know.
Nathan's laughter was bitter, hollow.
No, we're not perfect. We didn't have the power to fight the system your family built. But now we won't stay silent.
His clenched fists relaxed slightly as he looked Gregory in the eye, his voice lowering to a near whisper.
I'm not saying this out of hatred, Gregory. I need to know, what kind of man are you? Will you keep hiding behind your family's lies, or will you face the truth like we are?
Gregory's gaze stayed fixed on the letter, the shaky handwriting crying out with a truth that shattered his carefully built world. Turning to Amara, he spoke, his voice heavy with inner conflict.
You said this is just one part of the story. What's the rest?
Amara's lips curled into a faint, bitter smile.
The rest is in the documents I've gathered. If you want to know, Gregory, be ready for everything you've ever believed to come crashing down.
Rebecca's fists clenched tightly at her sides, her eyes flickering with a mix of fury and unease. She forced her voice to stay calm.
Gregory, you know who's real here. I've been with you through everything. They're only here to tear us apart.
Nathan let out a dry, mirthless laugh.
Tear you apart? No, Rebecca. We're here to rebuild, but not for you or the Whitmores.
Gregory clutched the letter, his eyes clouded with conflict but slowly hardening with resolve. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady and sure.
I'll find the truth, and if what she says is true...
He turned to Rebecca, his tone sharp and cold.
Then there's nothing I won't do to make it right.
Amara turned and walked away, Nathan following close behind. Gregory stood motionless, holding the letter like it was both a key and a burden. Behind him, Rebecca's expression twisted with a mix of anger and fear as she watched him drift further from her grasp. Rebecca thought, if Gregory goes too far, I'll have to do things he could never imagine. The Whitmore mansion stood still beneath the tranquil night sky, a fortress of impenetrable elegance. The glittering chandelier light spilling through the grand windows bathed the meticulously trimmed garden in a soft glow, creating a facade of perfection. Yet this beauty was but a thin veil, hiding the dark secrets festering within. Gregory moved briskly through the second-floor hallway, his leather shoes making muted contact with the plush red carpet. A weight had settled on his chest ever since Amara and Nathan's accusations had taken root in his mind. Their words, their piercing eyes, they refused to let him go. Tonight, Gregory knew he had to uncover the truth. His first stop was his father's study. Once the nerve center of the Whitmore legacy, it was the room where his father had made grand decisions and imparted lessons on responsibility, honor, and ethics. Now, however, its towering bookshelves and warm desk lamp carried a different aura, cold, unfamiliar, and shrouded in mystery. Standing in the center of the study, Gregory's eyes swept across the familiar details: the gleaming oak desk, the meticulously arranged law books, and business ledgers on the towering shelves. Everything was immaculate, too immaculate, and that perfection stirred a growing unease. Taking a deep breath, Gregory's gaze settled on the expansive bookshelf that covered an entire wall. The books were orderly, their leather spines gleaming faintly in the lamplight, but something urged him to look closer. His fingers brushed over the textured spines, the roughness of the leather sending a shiver up his spine. He pulled at the books one by one, moving instinctively, as if waiting for something to happen until finally he tugged at one.
Click!
The faint sound broke the heavy silence of the room. Gregory froze, his eyes widening as he gripped the book in his hand. Something within the shelf had been triggered. He stepped back as a low, mechanical groan resonated from the hidden mechanisms. But the bookshelf, which seemed like an eternal fixture, began to shift. Slowly, the towering shelf slid aside, its hidden gears creaking as though awakening from decades of slumber. The soft glow from the desk lamp reflected off the smooth wooden surface of a newly revealed door, its polished sheen giving it an otherworldly presence. Before Gregory stood a small, metallic door with no handle. Its surface was bare except for a wooden plaque etched with the Whitmore family crest. He had never seen it before, not in stories, not in his father's lessons. The air grew heavier. The walls seemed to close in, urging him to confront the secret lying beyond the door. His breath quickened, sweat dampening his palms.
"Father, what did you hide here?"
His voice sounded small, lost in the oppressive silence. Gregory raised his hand, his fingers brushing the icy metal surface. The chill spread through him, raising goosebumps along his arms. Closing his eyes, he took a steadying breath before pressing against the door. It swung open smoothly, noiselessly, as if built to withstand the passage of time. Beyond it lay darkness. Gregory hesitated, his feet rooted to the ground. The light from the study behind him spilled into the narrow space, revealing raw concrete walls and a solitary desk lamp. The lamp's dim yellow glow cast flickering shadows, turning the small room into a vault of forgotten secrets. He lingered at the threshold for a moment longer before stepping inside. The door behind him swung shut with a heavy thud, the sound reverberating like a final verdict. There was no turning back now.
"If I don't do this, who will?"
Gregory crossed the threshold, his footsteps echoing unnaturally in the confined space. With every step, he felt himself plunging deeper into a story he had never imagined he would face. The light illuminated the room just enough for him to make out a metal desk bolted to the floor, its surface scattered with old papers, a faded photograph, and a leather-bound journal. Gregory reached for the journal, his heart pounding as he opened it to the first page. There, in his father's unmistakable handwriting, was the beginning of a confession, a chilling narrative that promised to unravel everything Gregory thought he knew about the Whitmore legacy. The air inside the hidden room clung to Gregory like a suffocating shroud, heavy and stagnant. This was no ordinary space, it was a prison for secrets, a tomb where truths too damning to reveal had been buried. The room was narrow and stark, its rough concrete walls unpainted and unadorned. The mold-streaked surfaces formed grotesque shapes in the dim light, while cobwebs stretched across the corners, relics of the years this place had been forgotten. A single desk lamp stood in the center of the room, casting a weak yellow glow that barely pierced the darkness. Shadows danced along the walls and over the mismatched objects scattered across a long wooden table whose edges were worn smooth with time. Papers were strewn haphazardly across the table, yellowed at the edges, some crumpled as if gripped in panic. A few were bound in old folders, their covers marked in faded blue ink with labels like land agreements and eviction files. In the center of the chaos sat a leather-bound ledger, more carefully placed than the other documents. The corners of the cover were frayed, but the embossed title was still legible: Whitmore Business Plan Redevelopment Fund. Letters sealed with the Whitmore family crest lay scattered, some showing streaks of tears or smudged ink, written in moments of desperation. At the edge of the table sat a rusted metal box, its lock corroded and neglected. Gregory reached out, his fingers brushing against its icy surface. The box was heavier than he expected. When he pried it open, a thin cloud of dust rose, catching in his throat as he coughed softly. Inside were documents more damning than anything else he'd seen, a small ledger detailing minuscule compensation payments to displaced families, forged legal papers bearing signatures of people who likely had no idea they had agreed to sell their land, black and white photographs of homes before and after their destruction. One photograph bore a date and location: the neighborhood where Amara and Nathan once lived. Gregory's eyes drifted to the wall behind the desk, where a large worn map was pinned. Red pushpins dotted the map, marking every neighborhood targeted for redevelopment. Near each pin were short, handwritten notes in pencil, completed, signed 3/14 resistance noted, follow-up with legal action, immediate resolution needed, suggest external pressure. Gregory's breathing grew shallow. His trembling hand reached for a yellowed envelope that lay conspicuously at the center of the table. Written in his father's distinct, slanted handwriting were the words for Gregory. The sight of his name, written with unsteady strokes, sent a jolt through him. This letter had waited for him, guarding the darkest truths of the Whitmore family. He stared at the envelope, knowing that opening it would change everything. Yet he couldn't stop himself. His hands shook as he tore it open and pulled out a single sheet of paper, its contents etched with a heavy heart. His father's voice seemed to echo in his mind as he read.
Gregory, if you are reading this, then the secrets I've kept can no longer remain hidden. I know you will feel pain, anger, and disappointment in me, but I had no choice.
Gregory's grip tightened on the paper, his breath catching as he continued to read.
Rebecca came to me at a time when our family was on the brink of collapse. She brought a plan, a way to save everything your grandfather and I had built. But the plan was far from clean. It required the sacrifice of others.
His father's words hit like a blade, each sentence cutting into Gregory's already fragile trust.
You must understand, I took no pride in what I did, but the Whitmore legacy could not be allowed to fall. Rebecca orchestrated everything, from falsifying legal documents to convincing families to leave their land. They had no means to fight back. I stayed silent, believing that my silence absolved me of guilt. But that was just another lie. I told myself to hide my cowardice.
Gregory's breath grew ragged, his fingers clutching the letter tighter as the word cowardice echoed in his mind.
I saw their tears, Gregory. I heard their pleas, but I turned away. And now I cannot forgive myself. Every dollar our family earned from that land carries the weight of stolen dreams, blood, and tears.
The images of Amara and Nathan flashed before Gregory's eyes, their pain, their accusations, now unmistakably justified. The final lines of the letter were written in a hurried, almost illegible hand, as though his father had struggled to finish.
If you want to make amends, Gregory, do what is right. But remember, the truth will destroy everything, not just our legacy, but how you see me.
Gregory stood motionless, the letter trembling in his hand. Around him, the shadows seemed to press closer, the dim room closing in on him. The documents, the photographs, the forged agreements, they weren't just evidence of his father's sins. They were accusations leveled at him, a man who had lived obliviously off the spoils of these betrayals.
Father did this for me, but if I keep this hidden, am I any different from him?
The words escaped Gregory's lips, quiet and hollow. He looked down at the desk, the scattered documents illuminated by the faint glow of the desk lamp. They weren't just records of past deeds, they were demands for accountability. As Gregory stood, the weight of the letter and its contents bearing down on him, he realized that the man who had entered this hidden room no longer existed. The secrets he had uncovered had irrevocably altered him. The truth was now his burden to bear, his decision to make. For better or worse, Gregory had been changed forever. Gregory is uncovering a truth he never expected. If you find this story captivating, don't forget to like so we can continue bringing you more profound tales. Gregory emerged from the secret room, his face pale as if he had just stared into the depths of a nightmare. The letter in his hand felt like a torch illuminating the darkness, but its light brought searing heat, threatening to consume him. Clutching it tightly, he walked through the long, dimly lit hallways of the Whitmore mansion. The muted glow of the lamps only deepened the oppressive weight pressing on him. In the grand living room, Rebecca sat poised in an armchair, her presence exuding both elegance and power. A glass of red wine rested in her hand, its deep crimson reflecting the chandelier's light, resembling drops of blood. Her eyes brightened when she saw Gregory enter, but the flicker of welcome faded the moment her gaze landed on the letter he held. Gregory stopped at the doorway, his eyes piercing through her. His voice, though quiet, carried an icy sharpness that froze the room.
Rebecca, you lied to me.
Rebecca set her glass down slowly, her movements deliberate, as though trying to maintain her composure. Yet her fingers clenched the chair's armrests tightly, betraying her tension.
Gregory, what are you talking about? I have never lied to you.
Gregory stepped closer, holding the letter aloft. His bloodshot eyes gleamed with both fury and anguish.
You didn't just destroy Amara's family. You manipulated my father, and now you expect me to stay silent.
Rebecca stood abruptly, her graceful demeanor cracking. The sound of her heels tapping against the polished wood floor echoed as she strode toward Gregory. Her voice, once sweet, now sliced through the air like a blade.
Do you know what will happen if you reveal this, Gregory? Your family will lose everything. The legacy your father built, everything you have, it will all turn to dust. Everything, Gregory. All of it will collapse.
Her eyes burned with anger, but behind them lurked the cold, calculating glint of someone used to controlling every situation. She took another step toward him, lowering her voice into a venomous whisper.
Don't you understand? Your father did all of this for you, for the future of the Whitmore family, and now you're willing to throw it all away for an old letter and baseless accusations.
Gregory stepped back, her words striking a chord of fear deep within him, a fear he didn't want to admit. The thought of losing everything, of dismantling the life he had always known, gnawed at his resolve. Sensing his hesitation, Rebecca shifted tactics. Her lips curled into a derisive smile, her tone dripping with scorn.
Do you think you're some kind of hero, Gregory? Do you think you can fix everything? Don't be foolish. People like Amara and Nathan, they'll never understand how the world works. And we, Gregory, we're the ones at the top. We can't let people like them drag us down.
Gregory's grip on the letter tightened, the conflict in his eyes momentarily giving way to determination. His voice cut through her tirade like steel.
No, Rebecca, you're wrong. We're the ones who are wrong. And if you think I'll stay silent, you're sorely mistaken.
For a moment, Rebecca stood still, studying him with the precision of a predator analyzing its prey. Then, a cold smile returned to her face, and she stepped back, her gaze unyielding.
So, you've made your choice, Gregory. But remember, the truth won't just destroy me. It will destroy you. It will destroy your entire family.
Gregory said nothing. He turned and walked out of the room, his steps heavy with the weight of his decision. He knew there was no turning back now, that this choice would alter his life forever. As Gregory disappeared from view, Rebecca's icy facade cracked for a fleeting moment. She moved to the table and poured herself another glass of wine, her hands steady as her mind raced. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous intensity, the makings of a plan already forming. Picking up her phone, Rebecca dialed a familiar number. Bringing it to her ear, her voice dropped to a low, calculated tone.
We need to act now. Gregory is becoming a problem.
Gregory stepped out of the mansion, the letter clutched tightly in his hand, as if it held the weight of his entire existence. His eyes burned with resolve, but deep down, he knew the battle was only beginning. The dim hallway behind him stretched endlessly, a corridor of uncertainty that felt like a prelude to a world turned against him. Back in the opulent living room, Rebecca stood motionless for a moment, the glass of wine in her hand trembling not from fear, but from the fury boiling within her. Setting the glass down deliberately, she stared at the door Gregory had just walked through, her icy gaze sharpening. Rebecca turned to the phone on the side table and dialed a familiar number. Her voice, low and commanding, dripped with cold calculation.
Gregory has made a mistake. Follow him. I want to know his every move. And if necessary...
She paused, her eyes narrowing as a cruel smile curled her lips.
Make sure he can't cause any more trouble.
Setting the phone down, Rebecca sank back into her chair, her mind already weaving the threads of her next move. She picked up the wine glass again, her fingers steady as her mind raced. Elsewhere, Gregory's car sped down the deserted streets of the town. The letter lay in the pocket of his coat, a damning truth that felt like a live grenade ticking away. He needed to get to Amara before Rebecca could act. Yet, a sense of unease gnawed at him, as though unseen eyes were watching his every move. Behind him, a black car followed silently, its headlights dimmed to avoid drawing attention. Inside, two men sat in the shadows, their faces expressionless but their eyes sharp with purpose.
We'll wait until he meets the target,
one of them said, his gravelly voice devoid of emotion.
Then we take care of both of them.
In her modest apartment across town, Amara sat at her desk, the glow of a single lamp casting her face in sharp relief. The knock of her phone against the wood startled her. Picking it up, she saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. When she answered, the voice on the other end was urgent, almost frantic.
Miss Amara, I'm a friend of Nathan. I just got word from a reliable source. Rebecca has hired people to kill you. You need to leave now.
Amara froze, the weight of the words sinking in quickly. Fear flickered across her face, but she swallowed it down, her voice firm as she replied.
I'm not going anywhere. Gregory is bringing the proof. If I leave, she wins.
The voice on the other end sighed heavily, lowering to a tone of grim resignation.
If you're staying, be careful. They're not coming to scare you, Amara. Rebecca doesn't leave loose ends.
Amara placed the phone back on the table, her eyes narrowing as a steely resolve settled over her. She knew the danger she was in, but she also knew that the truth had to come out, even if it cost her everything. On the dark streets, Gregory's car accelerated as he approached the old neighborhood. The black car behind him matched his pace, its headlights flashing ominously in his rearview mirror. Gregory's chest tightened as realization dawned. They weren't just following him, they were hunting him. As the black car surged forward, trying to force him off the road, Gregory swerved, his tires screeching against the asphalt. Meanwhile, in the old neighborhood, Amara stepped out of her small apartment. Her eyes darted down the empty street, the shadows stretching out like specters of forewarning. She didn't notice the two figures creeping toward her, their movements predatory, their intent unmistakable. Rebecca sat in the grand living room of the Whitmore mansion, sipping the last of her wine. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced down at the message.
We've got them in our sights.
Rebecca's smile returned, cold and unfeeling. She whispered to herself, her voice like a blade cutting through the silence.
The game ends here.
As Gregory raced through the night and Amara braced for what lay ahead, neither could fully grasp the danger closing in on them. The trap Rebecca had set was about to spring, and the stakes had never been higher. Amara stepped out of her apartment, her sharp eyes scanning the deserted street ahead. Danger loomed, but the evidence in her pocket, a USB drive containing damning proof against Rebecca, was something she couldn't entrust to anyone else. Pulling up the collar of her coat against the biting cold, she pressed forward, the chill seeping into her skin, though it couldn't match the unease coiling in her chest. The street stretched out, empty and foreboding. Sparse streetlights flickered weakly, their glow interrupted by the shadows of overhanging trees. The interplay of light and dark seemed to conspire with the night, concealing whatever threat lay in wait. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message.
Rebecca has hired people. Be careful. Don't go alone.
Amara stopped, her heart pounding. She hesitated for a moment but clenched her fist instead of turning back. Her eyes hardened with determination.
I can't leave Gregory alone. If I don't show up, she wins.
She quickened her pace, cutting through a narrow alley to shorten the route to their meeting point. Her footsteps echoed in the confined space, accompanied by an occasional rustle behind her. Ignoring the sounds, she pressed on. But halfway through the alley, a shadowy figure emerged at the other end, blocking her path. The man was tall, dressed in a black coat, his face obscured by the brim of a hat. His raspy voice broke the silence.
Miss Amara, I believe you have something we need.
Amara froze, taking a step back. Her pulse raced as she glanced behind her. Two more figures had appeared, cutting off her escape. One of them laughed, the sound sharp and menacing, bouncing off the narrow alley walls.
You think you can run? We knew you'd come this way. You're not leaving here with that?
Amara's grip on her pocket tightened, her fingers pressing against the USB drive. She stepped back cautiously, her mind racing for an escape. One of the men lunged forward, his hand reaching for her. Amara reacted instinctively, twisting away and shoving him hard. He stumbled but quickly regained his balance. Another grabbed her shoulder from behind, yanking her backward. Amara screamed, her voice tearing through the night.
"Help somebody, please."
The third man laughed, his voice dripping with mockery.
"You think anyone's coming to save you? This is the end of the line. Just give it up."
Summoning her strength, Amara kicked out at the man closest to her, the force sending him staggering back. Seizing the moment, she darted forward, but the one behind her grabbed a fistful of her hair and yanked hard. She cried out as she fell to the ground, her coat pocket flipping open in the scuffle. The USB drive tumbled out, clattering onto the pavement. The nearest man bent down, snatching it up. Holding it under the dim streetlight, he smirked triumphantly.
"So this is what you were willing to risk your life for? Well, it's going to be very useful to us."
Amara scrambled to her feet, her body trembling with equal parts fury and fear. She lunged toward the man holding the USB, but the others restrained her, pinning her arms tightly. The man with the USB tucked it safely into his pocket, grinning.
"You've caused enough trouble, Miss Amara. Time to end this game."
Amara's mind raced. The evidence was slipping away, and so was her chance to expose the truth. Yet, even as the odds stacked against her, a fire still burned in her eyes.
"It's not over."
She spat, her voice defiant despite the hopelessness of the situation.
"You can't bury the truth forever."
The men exchanged amused glances, but in the distance, a faint sound, a screech of tires cut through the tension. The alley was dim, bathed in weak light from the scattered street lamps above, their faint glow swallowed by the thick shadows of the night. Amara's struggles echoed against the brick walls, punctuated by the jeering laughter of her attackers. One of the men gripped her arm tightly, trying to wrest the USB from her pocket, while the others blocked any chance of escape like impenetrable barriers. From the distance, rapid footsteps broke the tense rhythm of the struggle, growing louder with each passing second. Then, a shout cut through the cold night air like a blade.
"Let her go now."
Nathan burst into the scene like a storm, his face burning with determination, his body charged with fury. There was no hesitation, no trace of fear, only the blazing fire of someone unwilling to back down. Before the men could react, Nathan's fist collided with the jaw of the man pulling Amara. The sheer force sent the assailant sprawling backward, crashing into the brick wall. The USB slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the ground. The remaining two men whirled around, their expressions a mix of shock and rage. One of them snarled,
"Who the hell is this guy? Take him out!"
Nathan didn't wait for their next move. He stepped forward and drove his fist into the chest of the nearest attacker, sending him staggering back. But the man quickly recovered, pulling out a small knife from his pocket. Nathan dodged the blade with a swift step, countering with a solid punch to the man's jaw. The crack of impact echoed through the alley as the man slumped to the ground, groaning in pain. From behind, the third man grabbed a metal pipe propped against the wall and swung it toward Nathan's back.
"Watch out!"
Amara screamed, her voice sharp with urgency. Nathan turned just in time, raising his arm to block the blow. The metal struck his forearm with a sickening thud, and he winced in pain. But instead of retreating, he swept his leg out in a low arc, kicking the attacker's feet out from under him. The man toppled, the pipe clanging against the concrete as it slipped from his grip. Amara scrambled forward, grabbing the USB from the ground. Clutching it tightly, she looked up to see Nathan still surrounded by two attackers. His breath was heavy, and blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes burned with resolve.
"Nathan, we need to get out of here."
Amara shouted. Another attacker lunged toward Nathan, a knife gleaming in his hand.
"You're not getting out of this, you bastard!"
Nathan sidestepped the slash, grabbing the man's collar and slamming him against the wall with raw, furious strength. The attacker crumpled, groaning in defeat. Before Nathan could turn around, the last man swung a wooden plank hard against his knee. Nathan collapsed with a grunt, clutching his injured leg as pain surged through him. The man laughed triumphantly, raising the plank for another strike.
Nathan?
Amara screamed, frozen in terror. But Nathan wasn't finished. He surged forward, using his remaining strength to tackle the man to the ground. They wrestled for control, the sounds of their struggle filling the alley. With a final burst of energy, Nathan pinned the attacker and delivered a crushing blow to his ribs, knocking him unconscious. Breathing heavily, Nathan slumped to his knees, his body battered and bruised. Blood streaked his face, but his defiant gaze never wavered. Before the remaining attackers could regroup, the piercing sound of a police siren shattered the tension. Bright lights flooded the alley, illuminating the scene. The attackers froze, their faces twisting in panic. One of them muttered,
"Damn it, it's the cops!"
The leader shouted,
"Retreat! We can't get caught!"
They scattered like roaches, darting into the shadows of nearby streets and alleys. Their hurried footsteps faded into the distance, leaving the alley eerily quiet once more. Nathan tried to stand but faltered, his injured knee buckling beneath him. In the bright headlights of the arriving police car, Gregory ran toward them, his face pale with worry. Jumping out of his car, Gregory rushed to Amara, his eyes scanning her for injuries.
"Are you okay? Did they take anything?"
Amara, still trembling, held up the USB.
"No, I still have it, but they won't stop, Gregory. You need to see what's on this right now."
Gregory's expression shifted from relief to steely determination. He turned to Nathan, who was struggling to rise from the ground. Rushing over, Gregory helped him up, his voice thick with gratitude.
"Nathan, I thank you. If you hadn't been here..."
Nathan shook his head, his gaze firm despite the pain etched across his face.
"I just did what I had to. But this has to end tonight, Gregory. No more running, no more hiding."
Amara stepped forward, holding the USB tightly in her white-knuckled grip. She extended it toward Gregory, her voice steady but weighted with urgency.
"This USB contains a recording of your father. It explains everything. Rebecca wasn't just involved. She orchestrated all of it. Everything started with her."
Gregory stared at the USB, his hand trembling as he took it from her. The tiny device felt impossibly heavy in his palm, as though it carried the weight of his family's sins. His voice was low, almost a whisper.
"If what's on here is true, I swear she won't get away with this."
From the other end of the line, Rebecca's voice came through, calm yet laced with steely authority.
"I don't care how they escaped. I want them eliminated immediately. This is your last chance. If you fail again, don't expect my forgiveness."
The man on the other end silently ended the call, his gaze fixed on the distant glow of lights where Gregory, Amara, and Nathan stood together. For the first time, doubt crept across his face. Somehow, these people had evaded what had seemed like a flawless plan. Elsewhere, Rebecca sat in the grand office of the Whitmore estate, her fingers gripping a wine glass so tightly it seemed it might shatter. Her cold, calculating eyes stared at the computer screen before her, displaying footage from security cameras in the old neighborhood. Her whisper broke the silence, meant more for herself than anyone else.
"Everything I've built, everything I've done, I won't let them destroy it."
She turned her chair to face the large desk behind her, cluttered with documents, a phone, and a sleek laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her expression hardening with each keystroke.
"If I can't stop them,"
she muttered,
"then at least I'll make sure they have nothing to prove. Every shred of evidence must disappear before morning."
Inside Gregory's car, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Amara sat in the back seat, Nathan beside her, and Gregory at the wheel. The USB drive rested on the dashboard, a small object carrying the weight of their collective fates. Gregory's eyes stayed on the road, his voice steady but resolute.
We can't delay any longer. If what's on this USB can expose Rebecca, we have to go public tonight.
Amara nodded, but her tone betrayed her lingering apprehension.
Rebecca won't let this go easily. I'm certain she's already planning her next move.
Nathan, though visibly exhausted, spoke with firm conviction.
Then we have to act before she does. This ends tonight one way or another.
Back at the Whitmore estate, Rebecca took another call. The voice on the other end was cautious, almost hesitant.
We can't move against them tonight. The police are swarming the area.
Rebecca clenched her phone, her knuckles whitening as a storm brewed in her eyes.
I don't care what you have to do. If you can't stop them now, then make sure they don't have a chance to reach anyone who matters. Journalists, police, everyone must be on my side before they open their mouths.
She ended the call abruptly, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor as she strode out of her office. The sound of her footsteps echoed ominously down the long, cold corridors of the mansion, a harbinger of the chaos she was prepared to unleash. Rebecca knew the stakes. If she didn't act decisively, everything she had painstakingly built would crumble. But Rebecca Whitmore was not one to retreat. She had always fought to win, and this time would be no different. Her eyes burned with icy determination as she whispered to herself.
Let's see who breaks first.
The Whitmore mansion gleamed like a palace, its golden lights illuminating the expansive grounds around it. Luxury cars rolled in one by one through the ornate iron gates, ferrying a parade of high-profile guests to what had been billed as a groundbreaking press event. In the grand hall, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversation filled the air, blending into a symphony of opulence. Among the crowd were journalists, business magnates, and the town's most powerful figures. Yet beneath the veneer of grandeur lingered a subtle tension, as though an unseen storm was brewing. Champagne flowed freely, the tables were laden with exquisite hors d'oeuvres, and the staff glided through the room like shadows, their movements seamless and unobtrusive. Camera flashes sparked incessantly as journalists captured every detail of the seemingly flawless evening. But beneath the surface, whispers spread like wildfire, the crowd attuned to any hint of the unexpected. Rebecca stood at the center of it all, commanding attention like a queen holding court. Her fitted black gown, encrusted with shimmering stones, clung to her figure and radiated sophistication. Her smile was dazzling, exuding confidence and charm. Yet those who looked closely might notice the way her fingers clenched her champagne flute, the knuckles whitened under the pressure. Rebecca moved gracefully through the crowd, acknowledging guests with practiced elegance, her smile unwavering. But behind her poised exterior, her thoughts churned in a storm of apprehension.
Is he coming? Will Gregory ruin everything? No, I prepared for this. No one will believe him.
Her sharp eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Gregory's face or any sign of disruption. Though outwardly composed, there was a predatory intensity in her gaze as it lingered on shadowed corners and unfamiliar faces. She was waiting for what she couldn't avoid, but would face head-on. When the time came, Rebecca stepped onto the stage at the front of the hall. The hum of conversation receded, the crowd falling into a hush. She stood tall, her silhouette framed by the opulent chandelier's glow. The light danced across her gown, making her appear almost otherworldly. Yet, as she gripped the microphone, she felt the faintest tremor in her hands. Drawing a deep breath, she steadied herself and began to speak, her voice resonant and composed.
Thank you all for being here tonight. The Whitmore family has always been proud to stand as a cornerstone of this community. However, in recent days, there have been false rumors and malicious attempts to tarnish our legacy. Tonight, I am here to put those doubts to rest.
The audience broke into polite applause. Rebecca's eyes swept over the room, pausing a beat too long on faces that bore skepticism or suspicion. In those fleeting moments, the space seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing tighter, the air heavier. Behind the scenes, a security guard lingered in a dim corner, his hand pressed to his earpiece. A low voice crackled through the line.
Gregory and 2 others just entered through the side gate. What are your orders?
The guard's eyes darted to the stage where Rebecca stood. For a split second, their gazes met, and he knew she understood. Her response was silent but deliberate. A small, knowing smirk curled at the corner of her lips, and she gave a subtle nod, an instruction laden with unspoken meaning.
Don't let them disrupt my evening.
The guard turned and disappeared into the crowd, his steps brisk and purposeful. As Rebecca resumed her speech, her voice as steady as ever. But beneath her polished exterior, a flicker of tension burned hotter with every passing second. Far from surrendering, Rebecca's confidence grew sharper, her resolve hardening into steel. This was her domain, her story to control. And no one, not Gregory, not Amara, and certainly not Nathan, would upend it without a fight. Rebecca continued her speech, her voice echoing confidently through the hall, but her sharp eyes never stopped scanning the crowd. She could sense a faint disturbance near the doors, but she forced herself to stay composed, exuding calm for the sake of her esteemed guests. Then, without warning, the grand doors at the back of the room swung open with a thunderous bang. The resounding boom shattered the pretense of tranquility, drawing every pair of eyes to the entrance. There stood Gregory, tall and resolute, his gaze piercing through the crowd and locking onto a single target, Rebecca. Amara followed closely behind him, clutching the USB tightly in her hand, the key to unraveling the entire web of deceit. Nathan walked beside her, his face a mask of icy determination, his eyes scanning the room for any potential threats. The atmosphere shifted instantly, as if the air had grown heavier, charged with the electric promise of an impending storm. The guests, who moments ago were sipping champagne and mingling, froze in place. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, a wave of confusion, unease, and anticipation. Camera flashes erupted as journalists snapped photo after photo, documenting every step Gregory took into the lion's den. On stage, Rebecca faltered for the briefest moment. The confident smile on her lips stiffened, her eyes widening in shock before she quickly masked it with a haughty smirk. She set the microphone down with deliberate poise, turning to face Gregory with an expression that feigned indifference. Her voice, still light but laced with venom, broke the tense silence.
My dear brother, you arrived unannounced. I trust you're not here to ruin our evening.
The smile remained on her lips, but her hands, resting on the podium, gripped its edges tightly. Her knuckles turned white as she fought to maintain her composure, even as Gregory's unwavering stare burned through her carefully constructed facade. Gregory walked toward the stage, his measured steps echoing in the silent hall. Each step was a statement, a declaration of defiance. When he stopped, he stood tall, his eyes locked onto Rebecca with unyielding intensity. In a voice that carried over the crowd without need for shouting, Gregory said,
Rebecca, your time manipulating everyone is over. This is my house, and I will not allow you to deceive these people any longer.
His words cut through the room like a blade, slicing away the layers of pretense Rebecca had so meticulously built. A collective gasp rippled through the audience, and the murmurs swelled into a cacophony of whispered questions.
What is Mr. Whitmore implying? What has Rebecca done?
The cameras swung toward Gregory, their blinding lights illuminating him as if he were standing on trial. Yet he did not falter. Gregory remained steadfast, his presence as immovable as a monolith in a raging storm. His eyes gleamed with determination, a silent promise that the truth would no longer be hidden. Rebecca held her ground, her smile faltering just slightly as she felt the walls closing in around her. For the first time, the Queen of Whitmore felt the weight of a rebellion brewing within her kingdom. The chaos in the press conference escalated with every passing second. Rebecca, once poised and commanding at the center of the stage, now resembled a cornered animal. Every eye in the grand hall turned to her guests, journalists, and staff alike, all awaiting an explanation. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, transforming into a thunderous roar of questions and accusations, bearing down on her like an unrelenting storm. She forced a smile, but it was brittle, wavering at the edges. Her voice, no longer steady, rang out with a desperate edge.
Don't be fooled by these people. They're only here to smear the Whitmore name. You don't understand how hard I've worked to preserve this legacy.
But Gregory was unmoved. He met Rebecca's deflections with a gaze as unyielding as stone. His voice cut through the clamor, sharp and resolute.
The legacy you speak of is built on the tears and suffering of innocent people. I will not let you hide the truth any longer.
Rebecca gestured sharply to the security guards stationed around the hall, her attempt to seize control unmistakable. The guards began moving swiftly toward Gregory and Amara. But before they could reach them, Nathan stepped forward, his broad frame a wall of defiance. He planted himself firmly in their path, his voice low and commanding, brimming with righteous fury.
If you think you're protecting the right person, think again. She'll throw you away the moment you're no longer useful, just like she's done to everyone else.
The security guards hesitated, glancing uneasily between Rebecca and Nathan. Meanwhile, the journalists surged closer, their microphones pointed directly at Rebecca. One of them shouted over the cacophony.
Rebecca, are these accusations true? Do you deny the existence of the recording?
Rebecca's composure cracked, her voice rising to a shrill pitch of anger.
Shut up! Don't listen to him. It's all lies, fabricated to destroy me.
Seizing the moment of confusion, Amara weaved through the rows of chairs, heading for the podium. She crouched by the computer connected to the large projection screen, quickly inserting the USB. Time seemed to freeze as the small device clicked into place. Rebecca, realizing what was about to happen, bolted off the stage in a panic. She lunged toward Amara, desperate to stop her. But Gregory intercepted her, stepping into her path. His hands gripped her shoulders firmly, his eyes cold yet filled with profound disappointment.
Rebecca, stop this. You've hurt this family enough.
Rebecca struggled in his grasp, thrashing against his hold. Her voice shifted, breaking from anger to pleading, raw and frantic.
Gregory, please, don't do this. You don't understand what's at stake.
Gregory's grip tightened, his expression unmoved. Behind them, the screen flickered to life, the sound of a deep, familiar voice filling the hall. The room fell into an almost unnatural silence as the voice of Gregory's father echoed across the space.
Rebecca convinced me. I knew it was wrong, but we had no other choice. What we did to those families is unforgivable.
The words hung heavy in the air, impossible to ignore or deny. The room, once vibrant with laughter and chatter, descended into stunned silence. Guests who had been carefree moments ago now turned their gazes toward Rebecca, their expressions a mix of disbelief, judgment, and anger. As the recording of Gregory's father ended, the room descended into a suffocating silence. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavily on every individual present, thick with judgment and disbelief. The grandeur of the Whitmore mansion now felt like a cage, trapping everyone inside the fallout of a revelation too shocking to ignore. All eyes were on Rebecca. She stood frozen at the podium, her face ashen, her wide eyes darting frantically across the room. Her hands gripped the edge of the lectern as if it were the last tether keeping her from falling into the abyss. Her lips parted, trembling, but no words came out. A journalist broke the silence, their question cutting through the tension like a blade.
Rebecca, do you have anything to say about this?
The floodgates opened. Microphones thrust toward her, flashes from cameras creating a relentless strobe effect, and voices clamored over one another.
Do you deny this recording? Where was this evidence obtained? How will you take responsibility for what?
Rebecca took a shaky step back, her eyes darting desperately around the room, searching for an ally. But the powerful figures who once stood loyally by her side now looked away or observed her with cold detachment. Some turned their backs entirely, unwilling to be associated with someone whose fall was now inevitable. Her composure finally broke. She screamed, her voice shrill and cracking.
"You're all being fooled."
She pointed a trembling finger at Gregory, her accusatory gesture lacking the conviction it once held.
"Don't listen to him. This is all a setup. It's a lie."
But the crowd wasn't buying it. Whispers turned into shouts, and voices from every corner of the room rose in protest.
"You're lying. That recording can't be faked. Explain yourself, Rebecca."
Panic consumed her. Rebecca staggered back, the weight of the crowd's judgment pressing in on her like a tidal wave. She turned abruptly and made a break for the nearest emergency exit. Chairs toppled in her wake as she shoved through the throng, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor, a desperate, staccato rhythm of her flight. From the stage, Gregory's voice boomed, commanding the room.
"Rebecca, do you think you can keep running? The truth will always catch up to you."
Rebecca ignored him, her breathing ragged, her arms flailing to push aside anyone in her way. The emergency exit was in sight. She reached for the handle, but as she pulled the door open, two uniformed police officers stepped through, blocking her escape. One of them, their voice firm and authoritative, declared,
"Rebecca Whitmore, you are under arrest for charges of fraud and illegal property acquisition. You have the right to remain silent."
Rebecca recoiled, her face twisted in panic and disbelief. She clawed at the officer's arm, screaming,
"No, this is a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong."
Her protests fell on deaf ears. The officers swiftly restrained her, their movements efficient and detached. Rebecca's cries grew louder, but the crowd remained unmoved, their faces reflecting a mixture of fascination and scorn. Around the room, phones were raised, recording every second of her downfall. A journalist murmured to their colleague,
"This is the end for her. There's no coming back from this."
As Rebecca was escorted out of the Whitmore mansion, the flashing red and blue lights of police cars illuminated the grand gates. Journalists surged forward, their voices clamoring over one another.
"Rebecca, do you have anything to say? Will you deny the allegations?"
Rebecca remained silent, her once proud face now pale and devoid of confidence. The cold metal of the handcuffs around her wrists served as a grim reminder of how far she had fallen. The cameras clicked incessantly, capturing the moment the once powerful Rebecca Whitmore was brought to her knees. From the mansion steps, Amara and Nathan stood watching, their gazes fixed on the spectacle before them. Gregory followed behind them, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the night. His eyes lingered on Rebecca for a moment, and he spoke softly, almost as if to himself.
"You can run, but the truth will always catch up to you. In the end, we all have to face what we've done."
Inside the mansion, police officers worked methodically, gathering evidence. Amara handed the USB directly to the lead investigator, her voice steady but charged with emotion.
"This contains the recording and documents detailing Rebecca's actions. It will show you what she did to my family and so many others."
The investigator nodded, his expression grave. Turning to an officer nearby, he issued a firm directive.
"Ensure all this evidence is secured properly. It will be pivotal to the case."
Gregory stepped forward, adding,
"She didn't act alone. You'll find additional evidence in my father's office. The business records there will prove how Rebecca manipulated the legal system to seize property."
News of Rebecca's arrest spread like wildfire. Media outlets quickly picked up the story, broadcasting the explosive details from the press conference to the dramatic images of Rebecca in handcuffs. On one major news channel, a veteran journalist weighed in.
"This case has sent shockwaves through the community, not just because of the severity of the crimes, but because it marks the downfall of a figure who once embodied power and influence."
In the impoverished neighborhoods that had been stripped of their land and homes, small groups of residents gathered to discuss the breaking news. Their voices carried a mixture of relief, anger, and bittersweet vindication. An elderly woman, clutching a worn photograph of her old home, spoke through tears.
Finally, justice is being served. But can it ever truly bring back what we've lost?
Justice is gradually being served, but has everything truly come to an end? Stay tuned for the next chapter of this captivating story. The city courthouse was ablaze with light, its steps crowded with people eager to witness what was already being called the trial of the decade. Hundreds of citizens lined the sidewalks, jostling for a better view, many holding their phones aloft to live stream the proceedings. Placards with bold messages like "Justice for Us" and "Rebecca, return what you stole" waved above the crowd, adding to the charged atmosphere. The cacophony of reporters delivering live updates mingled with the restless murmurs of the onlookers. Inside the courthouse, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Every seat in the public gallery was occupied, and all eyes were fixed on the defendant's table, where Rebecca sat. Gone was the aura of the powerful socialite. In its place was a woman stripped of her grandeur. Dressed in a plain black outfit, her pale face betrayed her unease, though she tried to maintain an air of haughty defiance. Her hands, resting on the table, clenched tightly, an unconscious attempt to suppress the growing dread within her. Across the room, at the witness table, Amara sat tall, her gaze steady but heavy with the weight of past injustices. Beside her, Gregory leaned forward, his face resolute yet shadowed by introspection. On his right, Nathan sat as ever, the watchful protector, his sharp eyes sweeping the courtroom to ensure Amara's safety. In front of them, resting prominently on the prosecution's table, was the USB drive containing the damning evidence, a small object carrying immense significance. The prosecutor stood, his voice clear and authoritative.
"The state calls its first witness, Ms. Amara Johnson."
Amara rose, her movements deliberate and measured, and made her way to the witness stand. The room fell silent as each step echoed in the charged air, like a drumbeat heralding the inevitable confrontation of truth. Once seated, the prosecutor approached. His tone was firm but encouraging.
"Ms. Johnson, please tell the court what you experienced and the evidence you've brought with you today."
Amara took a deep breath, her gaze locking with the judge's. Her voice, steady yet brimming with emotion, filled the room.
"My family owned a large plot of land that had been in our family for generations. It wasn't just property, it was our home, our history, and our legacy. But then Rebecca and Gregory's father used the law against us. They forged documents, manipulated the system, and forced us to sell for far less than it was worth. We lost everything: our house, our farm, and our future."
She paused, her hands gripping the edge of the stand as she fought back the tears threatening to surface. But when she spoke again, her voice was resolute, her words cutting through the tension like a blade.
"They didn't stop with my family. What they did was deliberate, a calculated scheme to steal land from other Black families in our community. The recording I brought here today will expose everything."
The prosecutor nodded and retrieved the USB drive from his table. He held it up, addressing the judge.
"Your Honor, this recording captures a confession from the late Mr. Whitmore, detailing the crimes he and the defendant, Rebecca Whitmore, committed."
He inserted the USB into a laptop connected to the courtroom's audio system. A hush fell over the room as the first words of the recording played.
"I knew it was wrong, but Rebecca convinced me. She said if we didn't do it, the Whitmore family would lose everything. We forged documents and drove those families to ruin."
Each word landed like a hammer blow, reverberating through the courtroom. Rebecca sat frozen, her knuckles white, as she clutched the edge of the table. Her lips pressed tightly together, her face drained of color. Behind her, audible gasps escaped from the public gallery, where families affected by her actions sat watching intently. After Amara's testimony, more victims came forward. An elderly man, slight in stature but resolute in demeanor, approached the stand. His voice was raspy but unwavering.
We didn't just lose our land, we lost our livelihoods. They bankrupted us, left our children with no future. Rebecca didn't just take our property, she destroyed our lives.
Next, a young woman stepped up, her hands trembling as she held an old photograph. She pointed to it, a modest house surrounded by a garden.
This was where I grew up. My parents worked tirelessly to build this home, but Rebecca demolished it to make room for a luxury resort we could never afford to step foot in. She didn't just take our house, she took our memories, our dignity.
Each testimony added another layer of devastation to the narrative. One by one, voices long silenced spoke their truths, cutting through Rebecca's carefully maintained facade. As the final witness left the stand, the courtroom was enveloped in a somber silence. Rebecca remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the surface of the table before her. Her hands, now trembling, betrayed the fear she could no longer suppress. Rebecca sat motionless in her chair, yet inside, everything was crumbling. Her eyes remained fixed on the table before her, unable to meet the gaze of anyone around her. The oppressive weight of the courtroom bore down on her like a suffocating cocoon, trapping her in a spiral of despair. Her face appeared drained of life, but her hands, clenched tightly in her lap, betrayed the storm raging within her. Her nails dug into her palms, leaving raw, red crescents in her skin. The testimonies from the witnesses, the damning accusations, and the relentless playback of the recording echoed in her mind. Each word felt like a hammer strike, shattering the fragments of control she still clung to. She wanted to scream, to slam her hands on the table, to protest and drown out the condemning silence that surrounded her. But deep down, she knew any outburst now would only hasten her descent into the abyss. Rebecca tried to maintain an air of defiance, holding her head high, but the stares of the crowd pierced her like thousands of needles. She felt their judgment, their disgust, their scorn. Part of her seethed with anger, unwilling to accept how the tides had turned against her.
Who are they to judge me? Without me, they'd be nothing. Without Whitmore, they would have crumbled long ago.
But beneath the anger, buried deeper than she wanted to admit, was a gnawing fear. The truth was out, exposed for all to see, and with each passing moment, everything she had built was falling apart.
This can't be happening. It can't end like this. I did everything for the family. It was all to preserve Father's legacy.
Her eyes flicked briefly toward Gregory. A flicker of guilt welled up in her chest, but she extinguished it with the familiar rationalization that had carried her this far.
He wasn't strong enough. If it wasn't me, who else would have protected this legacy? He would have let it all collapse.
The sharp crack of the judge's gavel broke through the murmurs in the courtroom, calling for order. But Rebecca barely registered the sound. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out everything else. Her thoughts raced, tangled, desperate. She wanted to cry out that this wasn't the truth, that she was being wrongly accused. But when she tried to summon the sharp, persuasive words that had once bent others to her will, they rang hollow and powerless. She glanced around, searching for a friendly face, a lifeline of support. But there was no one. Those who had once stood by her now sat in stony silence or deliberately averted their gazes. She spotted Amara in the crowd, her eyes burning with resolve and quiet disdain. The strength radiating from the young woman was like a knife to Rebecca's pride, slicing through the last shreds of her composure. Humiliation and resentment surged within her.
Just a nobody,
Rebecca thought bitterly.
How dare she? If it weren't for her meddling, none of this would have happened.
But deep down, Rebecca knew. It wasn't Amara who had unraveled her carefully woven web of deceit. It was her own choices, her greed, and her refusal to face the consequences. And now, as she sat alone at the defendant's table, the weight of those choices pressed down on her, like the inevitability of a storm that had finally broken. The courtroom was so silent that the faint rustle of paper as the judge lifted the jury's verdict seemed deafening. Rebecca sat frozen in her chair, her hands gripping the armrests so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her breaths were shallow and rapid, her heart pounding as if trying to escape her chest. Though the judge was the focal point of every gaze in the room, Rebecca felt as though all eyes were boring into her hundreds of piercing stares, stripping away the last layers of her crumbling facade. The judge rose, his voice steady and resolute, each word landing like a hammer blow.
Rebecca Whitmore, based on irrefutable evidence and the testimonies of the victims, this court finds you guilty of property theft, legal fraud, and the destruction of countless lives and homes. You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in prison and are ordered to return all unlawfully acquired assets to the affected families.
Rebecca's body went rigid as the words washed over her. Her eyes widened in disbelief, her complexion pale as a ghost. Her fingers dug into the chair as her mind replayed the judge's words on an endless loop: 25 years in prison and return the assets. Her lips trembled as she shook her head, whispering to herself,
No, this can't be happening. They can't do this to me.
As two officers approached her, Rebecca shot to her feet. Her voice cracked, desperation spilling out in every syllable.
No, this is a mistake. You don't understand. Everything I did it.
She turned toward Gregory, her eyes a mix of pleading and venom.
Gregory, you can't let them do this to me. I'm your sister. Everything I did was to protect.
Gregory met her gaze with a calm, emotionless expression. He spoke softly, but his words were as sharp as the final blow she couldn't escape.
Rebecca, this is the path you chose. No one made you do this.
His response shattered the last fragile hope Rebecca had. Her face twisted in fury and anguish as she screamed,
You'll regret this. All of you will regret this.
The officers cuffed Rebecca's hands behind her back and began leading her away. Her shouts echoed through the room, but they no longer held any power. As the doors closed behind her, the courtroom erupted. Tears flowed, not for Rebecca, but for the long-awaited justice that had finally been served. Families who had suffered under the Whitmore family scheme stood and clapped, the applause growing like a tidal wave of relief and vindication. An elderly woman, holding a faded family photograph, sobbed openly. She turned to the person beside her, her voice shaking.
We've waited so long for this day. Finally, they've paid the price.
Nearby, a young man whose face bore the weight of years of struggle smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. He squeezed the hand of his young daughter, seated next to him, and whispered,
Our lives will change starting today.
The crowd turned their eyes to Gregory, Amara, and Nathan, their expressions filled with gratitude. A man who had lost his land to Rebecca's scheme stepped forward, tears welling in his eyes as he approached Amara.
Thank you,
he said, his voice trembling with emotion.
Thank you for not giving up. You fought for all of us.
The courtroom was so quiet that the sound of the judge leaving the bench echoed like a distant tolling bell. Gregory stood from his seat, taking a deep breath. His shoulders were heavy with the weight of the moment, but his eyes shone with a newfound resolve. He walked toward the podium, his steps measured and deliberate. The crowd watched in anticipation, no one daring to leave their seat. Placing his hands firmly on the podium, his fingers tightened slightly. Gregory raised his head, his gaze sweeping over the faces of those who had suffered at his family's hands before shifting to the group of journalists whose cameras continued to roll. His voice, deep and clear, resonated through the room. I cannot change what my family has done. No apology could ever undo the pain and losses you have endured.
At last they understand.
But starting today, I can and I will do what is right. He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Amara, sitting in the audience, looked at him intently, silently encouraging him to go on. Nathan gave a subtle nod, his approval clear in his steady gaze. Gregory continued, his voice steady but filled with conviction. I will relinquish the majority of the Whitmore family assets. The proceeds will go toward compensating the families who have suffered because of my father, because of Rebecca, and because of me when I lacked the courage to stop them." His words swept through the room like a cleansing wind, lifting the heavy pall that had hung over so many lives. An elderly woman in the front row burst into tears, clasping her hands together as if in prayer.
"Sometimes good people take time to appear. This is our chance to start again."
A young man, who had lost his family's farm, gripped the hand of his young daughter beside him. He leaned down and whispered to her,
"She has sacrificed so much, yet she remains strong. This is the least I can do to honor her."
The room erupted into applause, not loud or boisterous, but steady and powerful. It was a moment of solidarity, of agreement that justice and redemption had been served. The victims who had once doubted the very existence of justice now stood, applauding not just for Gregory's gesture, but for the profound act of accountability it represented. Gregory stood there, listening to the applause, but he did not smile. He did not feel pride, he only felt relief. His statement was not a gift, it was a duty. In his heart, he knew that no matter what he did, the losses suffered could never be fully undone. But this was the first step in reclaiming the man he truly wanted to be, the man his father and Rebecca had tried to bury. He turned to Amara, who had fought tirelessly to bring the truth to light. She nodded at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and understanding. He thought to himself,
"You've done the right thing, not just for them, but for yourself."
Gregory bowed his head slightly to the crowd, then slowly returned to his seat. There was nothing more to say. His actions and words had spoken for themselves. Amara rose and walked toward Gregory. Without a word, she placed a hand on his shoulder, a gentle but meaningful gesture. Nathan joined them, patting Gregory on the back. He spoke quietly, his voice low but filled with sincerity.
Who does he think he is to do this to me? Everything I did was for him, for the Whitmore family. And now he paints me as the villain."
Gregory nodded, his gaze drifting toward the large courtroom window, where sunlight streamed in. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of peace. While Gregory was being acknowledged for his redemption, Rebecca sat silently at the defendant's table. Her eyes bore into Gregory, every word he had spoken feeling like a hammer striking the last fragments of her pride. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and her hands trembled as they clenched tightly in her lap.
"You'll regret this. One day, you'll realize I was right."
As the officers approached, Rebecca did not resist, but her eyes burned with fury. She stared at Gregory, her voice barely above a whisper, but dripping with venom.
"Look, my dear, that is the end of greed and arrogance."
The officers cuffed Rebecca and led her out. As she passed through the crowd, the cold, disdainful stares of those she had once ruled over cut deep into her shattered pride. Not a single person stood for her. A woman in the crowd whispered to her daughter. Rebecca walked past those who had once feared her now. They felt nothing but relief and satisfaction. The courtroom doors closed behind her, marking the end of an era of power and the beginning of a new chapter for the victims of her actions. The vast land, once devastated by greed, was now alive with new purpose. The sounds of hammers striking nails, saws slicing through wood, and laughter filled the air. Small houses were gradually taking shape, their white walls gleaming under the sun and red tiled roofs standing vibrant against the blue sky. In the distance, lush green rows of newly planted trees stretched out, punctuated by bright blossoms, a symbol of renewal. Children ran around a newly built well at the center of the grounds, where Rebecca's former office once stood. Parents sat on temporary wooden benches, watching their kids play while engaging in cheerful conversations. Smiles adorned their faces, smiles long buried under years of hardship. On a high scaffold near the community center, Nathan stood tall and determined, directing a group of workers. He held detailed blueprints in his hand, pausing occasionally to guide the placement of a wall or the adjustment of a beam. He wasn't just working, he was inspiring. An older man with weathered hands holding a shovel approached Nathan. His sun-kissed face was etched with wrinkles, but his eyes sparkled with newfound hope. His voice, deep yet warm, carried gratitude.
"I never thought this day would come, Nathan. I thought we'd lost everything forever."
Nathan placed a reassuring hand on the man's shoulder, his smile radiant.
"Nothing is lost forever, John. We just have to rebuild, stronger than before. This isn't just about houses, it's about trust. All of us deserve a fresh start."
Nathan's words lit a fire of enthusiasm in the crowd. Workers paused briefly, clapping in appreciation, their spirits rejuvenated. The atmosphere brimmed with a renewed energy, transforming the site into a hub of progress. In the distance, Amara strolled along a line of newly planted trees, her fingers brushing gently against tender leaves. Each tree bore a small red ribbon tied around its trunk, a tribute to the families who had lost so much. She stopped in front of a large sign freshly installed by the workers. The inscription on the sign glistened under the sunlight: Josephine Support Center for a Resilient Community. Amara's gaze softened as she read the words. She reached out, her fingers tracing the carved letters, and memories of her mother came flooding back. A strong woman who had always believed that truth would prevail. Amara smiled, whispering softly, as if speaking to her mother.
"At last, you can be proud of me, Mom? We've done it."
Nathan approached, carrying a well-worn towel. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at the sign with pride. His voice, hoarse but warm, carried reverence.
"She was our inspiration. We're not just building a center, we're continuing her legacy."
Amara turned to Nathan, her eyes filled with gratitude. She nodded, placed a hand on his shoulder, and then looked back over the land.
"This isn't just my family's land anymore. It's now a symbol for all of us, a testament that a community can rise again, even from ashes."
Across the grounds, people who had once lost everything worked with a vigor they hadn't felt in years. A young woman painted the shutters of her new home. A middle-aged man trimmed the hedges, while children eagerly helped their mothers plant flowers in front yards. An elderly woman stood before her newly constructed home, her eyes brimming with tears while a smile lit up her face. She turned to the person beside her and said,
"I never thought I'd see the day I'd return here, but now it's even better than before."
Those who had once been crushed by Rebecca's greed now stood together, united in rebuilding a thriving community. From the ruins of the past, they rediscovered hope not just in themselves, but in one another. Rebecca's cell was a small, cold space with 4 gray concrete walls. The only light came from a small window high above, where weak rays of sunlight filtered through, casting a pale streak across the rough floor. A metal cot covered with a thin, tattered blanket offered no warmth. In the corner, a tiny table held an empty meal tray from earlier, smeared with remnants of food. The bleakness of the space mirrored Rebecca's current life: harsh, empty, and meaningless. She sat silently on the cot, her head bowed. Her hair was disheveled, her sunken eyes betrayed exhaustion, and her gaunt face bore no trace of the powerful and haughty woman she once was. In her hands was an old newspaper, its front page displaying an image of Amara and Nathan standing proudly in front of the newly inaugurated support center. The bold headline read, "Justice and Renewal, a community finds new hope." Rebecca stared intently at the image, her eyes heavy with regret. Her fingertips grazed the paper as if she could touch a world that was no longer hers. A single tear escaped, sliding down her hollow cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. Her voice, hoarse and barely audible, escaped in a whisper.
"That should have been me. If I had chosen a different path, if I hadn't clung to everything at any cost."
Memories flooded back days when she stood at the pinnacle of power, commanding respect and fear in equal measure. But now, all of it was a distant blur, and each recollection cut deeper into her spirit. Lowering the newspaper, her gaze fell to her wrist. A tarnished gold bracelet rested there, its once shining surface dulled with age. It had been a gift from Gregory's father, given during a special occasion, and she had always regarded it as a symbol of power and status. But now it was merely a cold piece of metal, devoid of meaning. She slid the bracelet off, holding it in her palm, her eyes fixed on it in deep thought. She murmured,
To have everything and lose it all, is this the price I have to pay?
A bitter smile flickered across her lips, but it vanished almost instantly. She clenched the bracelet tightly, as if it were the last piece of her former self she could hold on to. From the common area outside her cell, the faint sound of a television reached her. A news segment played, broadcasting footage of Amara and Nathan at the new support center. The anchor's voice was clear and brimming with emotion.
The Josephine Support Center, a symbol of recovery, now serves dozens of families who once suffered devastating losses. This community, once torn apart, has been reborn under the leadership of Amara Johnson and Nathan Carter.
Rebecca didn't turn to look at the TV. She just listened, her eyes closing as if to shield herself from the words that pierced her heart. Each sentence was a painful reminder of all she had lost and everything she could never regain. Laughter echoed from the other inmates in nearby cells, followed by a mocking voice.
Hey, Rebecca Whitmore, the queen of yesteryear. How's prison life treating you?
Rebecca didn't respond. She didn't glance at the door or react in any way. She lowered her head further, as if trying to shrink away from the world entirely. But deep in her eyes, a mix of bitterness and lingering regret flickered, a faint ember in the cold ashes of her pride. She remained on the cot, staring down at the frigid floor. Her emotions were a tangled mess: regret, self-loathing, and even a trace of lingering resentment. But none of it mattered anymore. She thought of Gregory, of Amara, of Nathan. For a fleeting moment, she wondered,
Do they forgive me? Does anyone even remember who I was?
But then she shook her head, laughing bitterly to herself.
Forgiveness? They don't need to forgive. And I don't deserve it.
Rebecca raised her head, her eyes drawn to the small window. A faint beam of sunlight fell on her face. But its warmth didn't reach her. It only served to remind her of everything she had lost and how there was nothing left to hope for. The land, once marked by pain and loss, had been completely transformed. A lush garden stretched out like a living tapestry, with rows of straight, vibrant trees swaying gently in the breeze. The chirping of birds echoed in the air, blending harmoniously with the laughter of children running around newly planted vegetable beds. In one corner of the garden stood a large apple tree, its gnarled trunk weathered by time, but its branches brimming with life. The lone survivor from years past, the tree now stood as a symbol of resilience and renewal. Around it, saplings had begun to sprout, their fresh green leaves heralding a promising harvest. Amara stood in the midst of the garden, her hands resting lightly on the old apple tree's rough bark. Her fingers traced the cracks and crevices, connecting her to the memories of her family. The scent of soil mingled with the freshness of young leaves, evoking a comforting sense of home, the embrace of her mother from long ago. She tilted her head up, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the earth met the endless blue sky. A group of children ran past, their joyful voices filling the air. One boy stopped suddenly, looking up at Amara with wide, innocent eyes, and said,
Miss Amara, your garden is amazing. When I grow up, I want to plant trees like you do.
Amara smiled warmly, her eyes soft with affection. She crouched down, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder, her voice kind and steady.
It's not my garden, sweetheart. This is our garden, yours, mine, and everyone's.
Nathan approached from behind, holding 2 glasses of water with condensation dripping down their sides. He handed one to Amara before settling onto a wooden bench under the tree's shade. For a moment, neither spoke, both quietly taking in the vibrant garden before them. Nathan broke the silence with a soft chuckle, his voice tinged with pride.
Look at this. We've turned a dream into reality.
Amara nodded, her gaze still fixed on the rows of trees. Her voice carried strength but also gentleness.
Justice isn't just about punishment. Justice is rebuilding from the ruins.
Nathan turned to her, his eyes reflecting agreement. He tilted his head slightly, offering a small smile.
And we did it.
Gregory entered the garden, his tall frame more subdued than before. Gone were the expensive suits and the aura of a wealthy heir. Instead, he wore a simple button-down shirt, its sleeves rolled up to reveal hands calloused from hard work, evidence of his efforts in helping rebuild this land. Walking slowly past the rows of trees, Gregory's eyes swept over each branch and trunk, as if committing them to memory. This garden wasn't just Amara's or the community's. It was a place where he had found forgiveness for himself. Stopping at the old apple tree, where Amara and Nathan were seated, Gregory hesitated briefly, his eyes betraying a flicker of uncertainty. He knew he couldn't undo the harm his family had caused, but he also knew he had come a long way from being a mere beneficiary of others, suffering to someone who contributed to healing. Carrying a basket of freshly picked apples, the first harvest from the old tree, Gregory placed it gently before Amara. He offered a quiet smile.
I thought these apples should return to their rightful family. I just helped them find their way back.
Amara looked up at Gregory, her expression softening. She accepted the basket with a nod, her hands cradling it as if it were a precious gift. No words were exchanged, but through their shared glance, she saw the sincerity of his transformation. Gregory had not only provided financial support but had also been instrumental in shaping the community's future. It was his initiative that led to the establishment of a scholarship fund for the children in the community, ensuring they had opportunities for education and growth unburdened by their past. A man from the community, once a victim of the Whitmore family's greed, approached Gregory and patted him on the shoulder. His voice carried gratitude and a touch of forgiveness.
I didn't think I'd ever be able to forgive, but your actions have shown me you're trying to do what's right. That takes courage. Not everyone has that.
Gregory nodded slightly, his eyes reflecting humility.
I'm just trying to fix what I can. I know not everything can be forgiven, but at least I want to help people start again.
Standing at the edge of the garden, Gregory watched families work, laugh, and tend to the rows of trees. He closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, the fresh air filling his lungs. In that instant, he realized he had found the true meaning of life not in the wealth he once clung to, but in using it to mend what was broken. Nathan joined him, clapping a friendly hand on Gregory's shoulder. With a smile, Nathan said warmly,
You've done well, Gregory. You're not just making amends. You've become part of the change.
Gregory glanced at Nathan, then at Amara, who was chatting with a group of children near the apple tree. He smiled softly, his tone self-deprecating yet heartfelt.
I'm just trying not to mess things up again. She, and everyone here, deserves this.
Around them, every tree in the garden carried its own story. A towering oak had been planted to honor the Johnson family, symbolizing strength and resilience. Smaller fruit trees were gifts from other families in the community, a promise that they would nurture this garden together. At the garden's entrance stood a plaque with gold-engraved letters gleaming under the sunlight, the Garden of Hope planted with perseverance, and love nearby. A group of women trimmed flower beds, their light laughter mingling with the gentle rustle of leaves. One of them turned to her friend, her expression brimming with gratitude.
A year ago, I didn't think I'd have anything left, but now I have a new home and hope for the future.
Amara's garden wasn't just a place to grow plants, it was a symbol of everything the community had endured and overcome. Every leaf, every budding fruit was a testament to rebirth, perseverance, and the power of unity. In the distance, children continued to play, adults worked together, and the sunlight bathed the entire garden in its warm glow, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light can find. Hit subscribe to continue following more great stories from us.